Time now for our Wall Street Week daily segment. David Westin, the host of Wall Street Week, joining us now.
Thank you so much, Katie. So we thought we were getting past some of the supply chain problems, right? Well, we're all seeing those images now of the Panama Canal zone as the levels go down in the water and the ships build up outside the canal trying to get through. So it raises questions about what is going on with the supply chain. And for an answer, we turn now to Bindiya Vakil. She's Resilinc Chairman, CEO, and co-founder. Bindiya, thank you so much for being with us. Your work at Resilinc is focused on monitoring risks to supply chain, specifically with respect to the Panama Canal. How big a risk is that?
You know, it's not on the scale of the LA Long Beach port disruption that we saw. It's also not on the scale of the Shanghai port disruption. There are few silver linings here in this particular case. We have more inventory levels onshore regionally going into 2023 than we had in 2019 going into the pandemic and those other events. We also have more emphasis on companies regionalizing their supply chains. So I think there's a silver lining here. Having said that, definitely companies are going to be seeing shipments, their transportation cost increase by 30 to 50%, just depends on the route, as well as delays of, if not a few days, then several weeks on certain ships, especially those that have, which do not meet the weight limits for transportation seamlessly through the canal.
And Bindiya, that's about the Panama Canal. We also hear reports out of the Rhine. Obviously, that's been having some problems for a while now. I've seen reports about the Yangtze River, even the Mississippi River. So how widespread are these challenges with navigation with respect to the supply chain?
Yeah, David, globally, extreme weather events have been tripling since 2019. We saw about, in 2016 or 17, Resilinc would have reported maybe 70 to 80 extreme weather events a year. Last year, we saw that go over 350, so it's been multifold increase. We see 6 times the number of flood-related events, and now we're talking about drought. As you said, Rhine, Yangtze River, we saw Mississippi, so all of the waterways and ocean choke points, such as Suez Canal, Strait of Hormuz, the Panama Canal, are all choke points, right, that are impacted by climate change and these disruptions. A bigger issue is actually on the factories as well. When you have these droughts, they affect companies' ability to get uninterrupted water and power, both of which are essential. In certain industries, factories cannot have any interruption to availability of water and power. We also see one more issue, which is that globally, when you look at the business continuity plans of many factories, they do not have backup power available. And certainly if they have backup power, it powers up lights and climate, but not the actual line itself. So availability of water, power, these are all critical risks that are facing the supply chain.
Bindiya, you mentioned some of the factory issues. We're seeing a lot of investment right now, spurred by the U.S. government under the CHIPS and Science Act for the so-called semiconductor fabs. I see some of those are being built in places like Arizona. Is this a possible risk to that plan?
Absolutely. It does require additional investment worth multiple hundreds of millions in order to recycle the water. A wafer fab requires 9 million gallons of clean water a day. And so that is not a small task for a drought zone. In fact, in Taiwan, we've seen drought cause supply chain and semiconductor disruptions because, semiconductor factories, as I said, require uninterrupted water and power. So these companies that set up fabs in these regions need to make those additional investments in backup power and recycling water continuously. This is also why companies need to map their supply chains. Unfortunately, many companies don't really realize that their site in Arizona that supplies them actually has a supply chain that spans across the world and might require 15 to 20 weeks to replenish inventory. So mapping the supply chain and monitoring for these disruptions, really knowing where the factory is and whether it's in a high water region or a low water region really affects the type of mitigation plans. Our customers are working on this with many suppliers as we speak.
Bindiya, going back to the aftermath of the pandemic, you and I talked at the time about things like friendshoring and reshoring, really redoing supply chains in light of what we'd learned from that. Is that going on? You're monitoring that now. Have those those supply chains been refactored?
It takes many years, but this is a passionate issue for me personally. We see companies are looking at Central America as well as south of Mexico. These are very competitive cost-wise, as well as availability of labor and natural resources-wise for companies to locally source, bypassing oceans entirely and having a land-based supply chain by working closely with our partners here. Actually, in Europe, we see a similar regionalization happening with countries in Africa where there is access to clean water, power, and plenty of labor, actually at highly competitive rates.
Bindiya, it's always so good to talk to you about supply chains. That's Bindiya Vakil, Resilinc Chairman, CEO, and co-founder.